Over the years, many games have been hailed as the greatest of all time. Some of these are widely beloved classics, while others are for a more cultured audience. Part of the reason I created this channel was to take a look at these games. I want to see where they came from, and more importantly, if they're still worth playing. So today we'll be throwing it back to the late 90s with Metal Gear Solid. Imagine for a minute you wake up and it's 1994. Confused, you look into the bathroom only to see somebody else in the mirror. The person in the mirror is Hideo Kojima. You are Hideo Kojima. For reasons unknown, you are now living Jeff Keighley's wettest dream. Hot off the release of Policenauts, you're ready to return to your long dormant series, Metal Gear. The 5th generation of consoles finally look like they have enough power to do justice to your vision. The only question now is, which one do you pick? The answer is obvious. You gotta go with the new kid on the block, the first console from the brand. You gotta go with the 3DO. With the console picked and an idea in place, all that's left to do is make the game. Contrary to what some on the internet might say about you, you're unable to snap your fingers and make a game appear out of thin air. Luckily, you have access to the Policenauts team and they know a thing or two about making video games. You bring this guy over as an assistant director. You also have him help build Legos with you. You bring in this guy to handle the iconic sound design. You bring over a young artist that begs you to let him design the new Metal Gear. He goes on to design the coolest robot ever made. Believe me, I would know. That young artist's name was Albert Yoji Shinkawa, a man that would serve as the art director on Metal Gear and go on to make some of the hardest images of all fucking time. His art turned my big boss into a solid snake. That's really just scratching the surface of the talent you have access to, both veteran and new. Unfortunately, Konami put a momentary pause on things when they ordered you and your team to port Policenauts to other consoles. Next thing you know, it's late 1995. A majority of the concept work for Metal Gear is finished. The only problem is that the 3DO is super fucking dead, a victim of a home console market shakeup that hit even the big boys. The Sega Saturn only sold well in Japan, while the rest of the world ignored it like a middle-aged man ignores serious health problems.
Ooh. That's kind of small.
Meanwhile, Atari was destroying itself with the Jaguar. You're telling me people wouldn't pay 250 smackaroos just to play this? I'm pretty sure this would be a top seller in a certain market today. At this point, the console race was really just two names, Nintendo with their N64 and Sony with their PlayStation. Sony was the new kid on the block, only entering the console market after a joint venture with Nintendo fell through in the early 1990s. Imagine living in the bad timeline with the Nintendo PlayStation instead of the Wand of Gamelon on CDI. Perhaps the Nintendo PlayStation died so we could all bask in perfection.
Yeah! That old Ganon's no match for the king.
The N64 and the PlayStation 1 were pretty similar consoles. However, due to Nintendo being Nintendo, their machine could not handle big games. Nintendo stuck with their cartridge technology that topped out at 64 megabytes. Sony's PlayStation was equipped with a disk drive capable of reading 10 times that size. This new CD-ROM technology also came with higher quality audio and video that just was not feasible on the N64. So with Sega, Atari, and the 3DO dead in the water, there was really only one choice for Metal Gear Solid. Journalists and fans were absolutely blown away when Metal Gear Solid released in 1998. They'd been waiting for a while as Konami drip-fed them with more and more information. The official PlayStation magazine called it the best game ever made. IGN called it innovative in every conceivable category. It won multiple Game of the Year awards, and it was going up against every boomer's favorite slideshow. The sales matched the accolades, selling 1 million copies in the United States in its release year. In 2001, the unexpected happened. The once niche franchise sold 6 million copies of a single game. Kojima admitted to the Dorito Pope that neither him or anyone else at Konami really expected these sales. In hindsight, it's not surprising. Metal Gear Solid was the game you would soyjack to your friends about as the future of gaming. It was used to show that video games could be more than just a toy, they could be art. However, the praise wasn't quite universal. You know how people call cinematic games movie games? Yeah, this was probably one of the earliest examples of that criticism. While some people loved the cutscenes and the storytelling, other people just sat there wondering, when the fuck do I get to play the game? Before you can even play the game, you need to decide how you're gonna play the game. There's an old PC port that's gimped in a few ways, so I wouldn't recommend it. You could get a little kooky, a bit wacko, and play Twin Snakes, a GameCube reimagining of Metal Gear Solid that uses a lot of mechanics from Metal Gear Solid 2. There's also Metal Gear Solid on the Game Boy Color, which I think is the best version of Metal Gear Solid if you don't want to play Metal Gear Solid. The only other option is the original on PlayStation 1 or emulation of the original. Even the official Master Collection re-release of Metal Gear Solid 1 is just emulating a PS1. I decided to emulate through DuckStation. I didn't do anything fancy, I pretty much just upped the internal resolution and threw a CRT filter on it and called it a day. And if you don't like the way it looks, then close your eyes, you silly rascal. So we got our version set up and ready to go. What's it like really playing Metal Gear Solid? Clunky. It's clunky. Going back to any early 3D game is typically going to be a pretty clunky experience, and Metal Gear Solid is no exception. Initially, I thought the clunkiness was due to the low frame rate. The game hits a cinematic 30 frames per second, and less frames a second will make a game feel less responsive. I'm not criticizing a PS1 game for being 30 FPS, I'm just saying I'm not used to playing games at 30 FPS. After the first hour or so, I gelled more with the frame rate, but the game still felt a bit weird. Large movements felt fine, but minute stuff could feel a little bit janky. For instance, trying to press up against a wall sometimes didn't seem to work, or trying to thread the needle between two landmines is pretty much just a death sentence. The D-pad makes a lot of this stuff easier, but even then, there were moments where Snake recreated Terminator 2 when it felt like my hands were doing something completely different. Controls out of the way, Metal Gear Solid is a tactical espionage action game, and the first two parts of that formula deliver much better than the last one. Not only is sneaking around doing spy shit a majority of the playtime, it's also the most fun parts to me. Entering a room and going first person before planning your attack is Metal Gear Solid at its best. This is most exemplified with the opening areas. The game opens with some sneaking around in tight spaces before dropping one of the hardest opening title cards of all time, placing you in a more open-ended area above ground once it's finished. These areas are both excellently designed and really graphically impressive. There's no mistake where you are, and the sense of atmosphere is still excellent despite the extremely limited polygon and texture budget. I was really impressed seeing enemies' breath and was blown away by these reflections in the water puddles. I have no idea how Kojima was able to do this on the PlayStation 1, considering real-time reflections require NVidia ray tracing technology. For the low price of your left kidney, you too can own a 5090 and play upscaled 540p 30 FPS with 200 interpolated frames, AAA slop. For more information, check out my link in the description. Snake gets access to a bunch of different tools, which opens the player up to decide exactly how they want to approach each challenge. I think the lack of a traditional menu for your weapons and tools really encourages experimentation. The weapons and tools list are accessed by holding a button and scrolling through them. The moments in between the big boss fights can be as hard or as easy as you want them to be. I played really simply. I was like an introvert at a bar, slipping my way between people, doing my absolute best to avoid being seen, only resorting to deadly measures when forced into a social interaction. I think I played the game the intended way, but you can make many different playstyles work. These playstyles will all combine into one clusterfuck style when your plan goes to shit anyways. Even the best laid plans can easily be thrown off by being an idiot, which alerts all of the guards. This sound has become so iconic because it'll turn even the most gaped asshole into a diamond manufacturer when you hear it. At this point, all bets are off. The goal is simply to hide long enough to reset the alert or die trying. I love the stealth system because it keeps the tension high. One slip up can turn deadly faster than you can say like and subscribe. The music and the sound also feeds both sides of this loop. The subtle sound design of sneaking around is phenomenal, complemented by cool and subdued music, littered with odd background sounds and droning chords to keep you a little bit uneasy. When you're spotted, it changes into a loud, chaotic jam, one that slaps harder than Dana on the white, but it does mean you're about to head to Pound Town unlubed. Despite being derided as a movie game, the game is much more reactive than it initially seems. There's simple stuff like every dead NPC has their own camera angle if you crouch next to them, all the way to more complex stuff like Ocelot giving you shit if he kills you too many times, or the Colonel progressively losing his shit if Snake decides to kill Meryl during the Sniper Wolf showdown.
Snake, what the hell? Are you trying to kill Meryl?
You've gone insane?
There's too many instances like this to count, but this YouTube channel has a bunch of them on there, and it's really interesting to take a look at them.
Friends, I'm talking about this.
It's good that the tactical espionage bits feel good because the action part feels janky as hell. There's an auto-aim system that's supposed to try and help you hit targets, but I felt like sometimes it just didn't want to work. The game also expects you to know how to move and shoot despite never mentioning how to do that in the game. Even stealth attacks like choking a guy out from behind can be pretty anal on exactly where you need to be. I tried to give this guy in the bathroom the Bateman special, and it only worked about 50% of the time. As a result of the controls, direct combat is not the game's strong suit, yet almost all of the game's bosses are dealt with by using direct combat. I disliked most of them except for Metal Gear Rex and the fight with Vulcan Raven. Metal Gear Rex is frustrating, but it feels like a fun scramble against unbeatable odds, with a few different strategies that you can choose to implement. The Vulcan Raven fight emphasizes the best parts of Metal Gear Solid, using your tools to stay undetected while striking out from the shadows. It also kind of looks like a game of Bizarro Pac-Man, but I'll let you decide which description's more fitting. Otherwise, fights like Sniper Wolf and the Hind D were a test of patience more than they were a test of skill. The controls for the sniper and the javelin feel like absolute booty cheeks, especially the sniper, which is useless unless you're zanned up like a suburban housewife to stop Snake's hands from a quaking. They were cool moments, but the actual fights were just annoying. I think Psycho Mantis sums up how I feel about the bosses the best. The lead up to him is bonkers. The dude is out of his mind, and he's shattering the fourth wall in a way that's pretty much never been replicated. He reads your memory card and will comment on other Konami games you've been playing. He also straight up reads your inputs like an Elden Ring boss from hell. The only easy way to avoid him doing that is plugging your controller into port 2. It's crazy, even to this day. Games doing stuff outside of the game is still a very untapped idea. The closest thing I can think of is some PC horror games that leave text files on your computer for clues and stuff. The build up to Mantis is awesome. The need to switch ports is awesome, but once you do that, the actual fight is just not that interesting. There isn't anything about the gameplay of the fight itself that's cool. The before is really engaging and the after is a good moment, but the gameplay just feels like an afterthought. That's how most of the bosses feel. They're really big characters, they have really cool moments, but the gameplay of the fights is just meh. The bosses of Metal Gear Solid feel like if Melania from Elden Ring had 2 attacks, she'd still be a highlight because of the story, the crazy character design, and the immaculate feat, but the lack of an interesting fight would leave her as a disappointing character. All in all, the gameplay of Metal Gear Solid is a mixed bag. The controls don't feel great, but sneaking around the base does. The bosses aren't great to fight, but the moments they provide are great. The combat wasn't great, but learning the rooms and the guard behaviors to avoid combat was. It's good in places and rough in others, but I hope it's not what you came to Metal Gear Solid for, because if it is, you're gonna have a terrible time. Before I go into my problems with the story section of Metal Gear Solid, I wanted to show my appreciation. I love the voice acting and the performances in this game. A lot of them are campy and over the top, but they do breathe life into these polygonal monsters. The voice work is so good, it's easy to overlook the George Lucas levels of outrageously strange dialogue that can happen. Solid Snake in particular is outstanding. He has one of the most iconic voices in any piece of media. He's cool and collected a lot of the time, but not always. There's scenes where he loses his cool with anger or worry, and it really comes through in his voice. Every once in a while, Metal Gear Solid will drop some banger lines that just make you say, damn. I particularly liked the conversation Otacon and Snake have after Jax films murders Sniper Wolf. It's an interesting discussion about purpose that transcended corny for a second and was actually just good.
What was she fighting for? What am I fighting for? What are you fighting for?
If we make it through this, I'll tell you.
Okay, I'll be searching too.
The relationship the game has with the fourth wall was consistently entertaining too. They did things with the fourth wall that only work because it's a video game. Things like Psycho Mantis wouldn't be possible in any other medium. The fourth wall was also used for more humorous stuff like the Colonel giving Snake button commands as a form of tutorialization.
Snake, if you want to go up or down a ladder, just press the action button by the ladder.
There's interaction here that couldn't be done in any other medium either. Using the codec, you can get reactions from your friends after big events, which further fleshes these characters out. By the end of the game, it feels like you really know who these people are, which is impressive considering their faces look like Batman villains. These characters might look like if Van Gogh was around to create 3D art, but the camera angles and voice acting really makes these cutscenes come together. I might have wanted to skip some codec calls, but these cutscenes consistently use 3D space really well, which is impressive considering the time period that they were made. The game does a good job at keeping your attention on the plot. There's lots of twists and turns to the story like any good spy caper needs. For how convoluted Kojima can get in later titles, the main plot is easy to follow and carries you from place to place. Finally, there's a lot of little things about Metal Gear Solid world building that I love. Little character quirks like the ninja refusing to trust a weapon with his life, or Ocelot's disappointment or excitement on how good of a fighter Snake is. I also like how Liquid believes that he's the recessive of the clones when in reality he's the closest clone to the big boss, being the very thing that he resents Solid Snake for. As a series, Metal Gear Solid is one of the most interesting fictional worlds ever birthed from a video game. A lot of that did start here, and while I did like these elements, I didn't like the way that they were presented or the way that they interact with the gameplay.
Did I ever mention Joe Wimpelkowski to you?
Probably.
Please forgive me, Dorito Pope, for my criticism of the Holy Scriptures. I don't want to sound like a snob, but in my opinion, Metal Gear Solid is written terribly. Metal Gear Solid breaks the fundamental rule of storytelling at every chance it can. It almost never shows, it almost always tells. This is most exemplified by the codec calls. The calls are all over the place in tone and topic. I'm actually surprised we didn't get a codec call where Snake critiques the way income tax brackets work. They're all over the place because most codec calls are just exposition dumps, sometimes turning Snake into an idiot to justify them them happening. The Colonel will say, "Snake, the sandwich needs to have mayonnaise on it." And Snake's like, "Mayonnaise? What's that? Some type of ketchup?" And then Otacon comes in and explains the history of mayonnaise and how to make it in painfully granular detail. And then they all kiss. The cutscenes don't fare that much better than the codec calls.
We were conducting exercises with a new type of experimental weapon. A weapon that will change the world.
What? Metal Gear.
It hadn't been for the revolution.
Revolution?
Baker knows one, and I know one.
Baker? The president of Arms Tech.
Psycho Mantis can read people's minds. You can't resist.
Psycho Mantis?
But there is a way to stop the launch.
What? Card keys?
Somewhere in the second floor basement.
Second floor basement? Personal area network, huh?
What about the Pentagon?
Pentagon?
We aren't shown why Metal Gear Rex is dangerous. We're told in painful detail. We don't get to see Meryl and Snake build a relationship. They tell us how they feel about everything. If you've ever dated someone who says they love you but never does anything to show that love, then you have already played Metal Gear Solid. I understand when you're dealing with very limited visuals, showing can be hard, but you can show in text. You don't need characters spelling everything out all the time. MGS is quite possibly the most verbose game I've ever played, to its own detriment. It's honestly almost offensive how little faith Kojima has in the audience. Everything's over-explained, like Kojima's terrified the player won't understand something. Parts of this game remind me of a boring history lesson, one that ruins insane events like Abe Lincoln's assassination with over-analysis, to the point where you wish Mr. Booth would have just taken you instead. There's other moments in the story where it just disappears right up its own asshole. Characters whack you over the head with a mallet about how nuclear bombs and war are actually a bad thing. Snake is disgusted about the storage of nuclear materials. Really? This dude's a fucking killing machine.
So they just close the lid and try to pretend like it'll go away?
Essentially, yes. And they're not even doing a good job of storing it. Many of the drums are corroded, with nuclear waste seeping out of them.
Unbelievable.
Is this something Snake is saying, or is this just Kojima talking through him?
I'm just a man who's good at what he does. Killing.
Look, I love Kojima's message, and I agree with his points on nukes and war and what power can do to people. I just hate the way it's conveyed. The opening FMV of Fallout 1 does a better job of showing the same general idea with fewer words and 1/100th of the runtime. Some of this weirdness could be down to the translation, which Kojima didn't love. I've seen enough anime and read enough manga to know that sometimes translations can come out extra wordy with a lot of the nuance stripped away. But considering Kojima was more hands-on with Twin Snakes and the writing is even more wordy there, I'm not sure that we can blame translation here. Did Snake just backflip onto a fucking missile? The cardinal sin is actually how the story interacts with the gameplay, or rather, how it doesn't. A big reason I loved how Valve made their single-player games before they turned into a casino is their dedication to keeping you in control. I think the longest section in any of their games where you don't have agency is the opening tram of Half-Life 1. Even then, you can jump around like a Fortnite kid on his 6th G Fuel scoop of the day. Metal Gear Solid constantly comes to a screeching halt for cutscenes or codec calls. The cutscenes generally use their time pretty well. How else am I supposed to know that Meryl shakes her fat dumper so much that she can't really use a disguise? See, this is how you show, not tell.
How did you recognize me in disguise?
I never forget a lady.
So there's something you like about me, huh?
Yeah, you've got a great butt.
Oh, I see. First it's my eyes, now it's my butt.
God damn it, you just had to explain it. Have some faith in your audience, you fucking bastard. On top of the questionable writing, the codec calls are the worst offender of halting everything. I'm sure the novelty of this much voice acting in 1998 made this awesome, but the imagery of these calls is so minimal, completely stopping the game is fucking unnecessary. I'm not a lore master on Metal Gear, so maybe Snake has to take a Colin Kaepernick for a booty call to your mom at 4 a.m. But if he doesn't, then why does he? Why can't we walk around and have a codec call, like listening to audio logs in BioShock? Some conversations are fun, but sometimes I was just wondering when they were gonna move the fuck on. There's no interaction to the conversation, so they just feel like a story road bump in a game that is already filled with them. An old review said there's times that the game feels like mini games in between cutscenes, and it really can. I'd argue that the entire key changing process in the later half of the game only exists to put a little bit of padding in between codec calls. It's all a bit much, and it distracts from the game part way too often for my taste. It feels like two completely different products that were glued together. I love Kojima's attention to detail. I just wish he found a way to incorporate it that didn't feel like a head kick from Michael Chandler.
No need to hide.
Is Metal Gear Solid the best game of all time? Not to me. I think it deserves a spot on the top 100 for many reasons, just not my number one. For the time it came out, it's an absolutely insane video game. I agree with the statement that it's innovative on all possible levels. The game in this series has moved video games forward in many ways, and it is one of the most innovative games of all time. However, this innovation has come at a cost. While I think games like Mario 3 or Miss Pac-Man are pretty much timeless, Metal Gear Solid very much isn't. Story-wise, it's filled with late 90s tropes, and gameplay-wise, it's very, very, very PlayStation 1. As long as you're ready for those bumps in the road, it's still absolutely worth experiencing. It's a very interesting game that went on to spawn an extremely interesting series. Even if I have my issues with this game, I can't deny its impact or its quality nearly 30 years later. If you haven't played this one before, I would highly recommend it. Just remember, it's from 1998. How do you guys feel about the first Metal Gear Solid? Is it your favorite game ever? Would it be in your top 100? Should I play Metal Gear Solid 2 for this channel? It's the only game in the numbered series that I've never even touched, but I've always been a little curious about it. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
That's right, we're Japanese.